My father was a school teacher. My mother was a housewife. I was born really at the moment when the grandparents made the move from the pushcart to the store and from the Lower East Side to Brooklyn, really, and I grew up on Eastern Parkway and around Crown Heights. Went to PS 161, I believe it was. The area that I grew up in was Jewish middle class mostly, like my parents and grandparents. They were doctors. There were some businessmen, lawyers, teachers, and it was all white, and a lot Jewish. My father, I think, had wanted to be a writer. And when he graduated, he worked his way through college to Columbia, holding, like a lot of them, 2-3 jobs at the same time. And he was offered a job by William Fox, who was one of the early movie pioneers, 20th Century Fox, and he wanted to take it, but he was the eldest child and the son of immigrant family, 6 or 7 kids, and they were very poor, and he had to get a job that paid something and had some security, and that was teaching then. You didn't need a further degree at that time, so he became a school teacher. I grew up with the silent movies, really. I'd been to the movies a lot by the time sound came along. But I loved it. I loved movies. I loved going there and waiting outside the box office until an adult came along, and you'd ask them to take you in because they didn't take kids by themselves. I think it wasn't until much later, until I was in high school probably, that I made any kind of connection to what was up on the screen and what people did to put it up there. I wanted to be in movies in some way, but I didn't think of it as, well, somebody wrote it, and I started writing very early in school. But if you wanted to be a serious writer, you became a novelist or a poet or a playwright. Not movies. I mean, movies were Hollywood, and Hollywood was somewhere that you went and sold out for a lot of money. My dramatic writing was devoted more to playwriting than movie writing. I didn't do any serious writing till college, and then I wrote a couple of short stories that the New Yorker took, and that was a big thing then. I remember the first story they paid me $50 for, and then a couple of weeks later I got another check for them for $30 more, saying they hadn't paid me enough. So it was $80 that I got for the story, and I thought of myself then as that kind of writer. I would write short stories and one-act plays I had written, and then when I graduated, I got a job rewriting a play for a Broadway producer, and he paid me $15 a week to do it, and I lived on that. I got a room on 52nd Street for $8 a week, and I could live for $1 a day. I could eat well in those days. And I rewrote this play, and it went on, failed, but that was really what I was thinking of, that kind of writing.
Who was the producer?
Producer was a man, I think, is a man named Joseph Hyman. He was a producer. He was the business manager of Moss Hart, and a producer or co-producer stuff he did.
You've mentored so many screenwriters, and I know you've had a lot of mentors yourself, I think. And I think one of them maybe was Moss Hart, right?
It was, well, I met him the summer I was 13 at a summer adult camp where his family had a bungalow and we had a bungalow right next door. My parents became friends with his parents and I with him, and he was just terribly nice to me, extremely nice, and he was a lovely man.
Where was he at that point with
He
Kaufman?
had just, that's something, he had his first hit, Once in a Lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And
About the movie business.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but you know, I would go to rehearsals of his plays, and as a matter of fact, the story I sold to the New Yorker was through him. That is, I'd written this story in college, my junior year. I didn't know what to do with it, and I sent it to Morse for criticism, really, not for anything else. And he sent it along to Harold Ross, who ran the New Yorker.
Well, you went to Dartmouth, right?
I went to Dartmouth,
Mm-hmm.
and
What was your major?
English. What else? Really, English, drama, whatever. You know.
Now, was Schulberg there then?
Bud had just graduated,
Mm-hmm.
but he came back that freshman year. He was writing What Makes Sammy Run, and I met him then, and he was very nice to me. He kind of mentored me a bit. I became the editor of the magazine, the humor magazine. The Jack-O-Lantern it was called, you know. And I liked it there. I liked it very much. There were a few teachers who were meaningful. A couple of art professors and a French professor. And I felt it a good experience. I was on the fencing team. I traveled around. And after I graduated, as I said, I got that $15 a week for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got drafted quite early in February of '41. I started writing reporters at large while I was in the Army for the New Yorker. I wrote what was probably the first soldier show, really, a musical comedy. There was some writer who was a composer, some soldier who was a composer, another couple who were dancers, and I wrote this show, and it was going to be a pretty big thing. The Brooks Atkinson, who was, I think, the Times drama critic, was coming down, and John O'Hara,
Wow.
who was the drama critic for Newsweek, I believe. He was coming down, and
But he was publishing in the New Yorker too then, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. But they were going to come down, and it was a big thing, and we were due to open on December 10th. And December 7th,
Wow.
we're in rehearsal when this somebody was listening to music on the radio. Then that stopped, and people were talking. And I was outside. They called me in to listen to this news, you know, which is Pearl Harbor. And it seemed very far away, you know, because I remember we got the news. One of the actors, typically, you know, said, "This means we're not going to get the critics." and of course we did open finally several weeks later, but nobody came down, and it wasn't a big thing by then.
When was This Is the Army? That must have been...
Well, I was one of the dancers, had been in a show that Morse Hart wrote called Lady in the Dark.
Gertrude Lawrence.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and Danny Kaye. It was his
Tchaikovsky.
big thing. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very sweet, very nice dancer, and he one of his boyfriends was the son of a Army general. And they got him, Eddie, my friend, up to This Is the Army, which was, they were just putting together, the dancer. And he got me up. And I went up to write publicity, basically, for them. And I had a little room in a Quonset hut right next to Irving Berlin. And he would pop into my office every once in a while to ask me what I thought of a lyric or something like that. It was a formality for him in some way. He wasn't going to listen to anything I or anybody else said, basically, but he did it. And again, he was very nice, very, very nice to me. And I wrote a piece, a reporter at large for the New Yorker, on actors in the Army, on the rehearsals for This Is the Army. And they liked the piece and they were going to print it, and I had to, as a formality, send it up to my superiors in the Army for clearance. And some regular Army colonel decided it was bad news for the Army. It was making fun of the Army and should not be printed. I ran to Harold Ross, who I had known a little bit by that time, and he loved it. He loved a fight, and particularly with the Army. And he had been on the Stars and Stripes in World War One. He called General Marshall. He got permission from he said he was going to run the piece anyway. And I said, you run the piece, I'm going to end up in the Aleutians or something. You know, they're going to... And he said, nah, fuck them out, you know, the Army. And he ran the piece, and before there could be any repercussions, the Army started an Army magazine called Yank. It used to be a weekly. And the head of it was a colonel, domestic life, a publisher who'd been on the Stars and Stripes with Ross. So Ross called him about me, and I got transferred over to Yank. And that was where I stayed for the next 3 years or whatever it was.